I would rather spend my life doing things that are helping the public.
Welcome to the Voter Interest Project's candidate interviews for 2024. I'm Alan McPheeters, the Executive Director of the Voter Interests Project. In 2024, voters in Island County will elect county commissioners for District 1, Central and South Whidbey, and District 2, Oak Harbor. 7 candidates filed to run for these seats during filing week in May. We've invited all of these men and women to make their case in our second annual candidate interview series. We also have extensive coverage of these candidates on our website, voterinterests.com. The following interview is with Melanie Bacon, a Democrat from Langley, the incumbent District 1 commissioner who is running for re-election to the seat she has held since 2021. We provided a list of potential questions to Commissioner Bacon in advance of the interview. All right, well, good afternoon. Today is Friday, June 21st, and we're here with Melanie Bacon, who's running for re-election as the Island County Commissioner in District 1. Commissioner, welcome to the Voter Interest Project.
Thank you, Alan. I'm real happy to be here, and I appreciate the invitation.
Oh, of course, of course. Where are you today? Are you at home or are you in an office? Or?
Right now, I'm at my home. I've been spent the morning at Island Transit, did some other stuff. It's been a busy day. Right now, I'm talking to you from my home.
Very good. Very good. We'll circle back to Island Transit because that's
sure
topical and very interesting. But let's start out with, I always kind of open this up as kind of a lightning round, just some biographical stuff about you so people get a sense of who we're talking to. So are you married or single?
So you'd think that first question wouldn't be a stumper. I live with a life partner to whom I am devoted.
Fair enough. Do you have children?
I do. I have 2 amazing sons. One is a mailman in Minneapolis. The other one programs AI for the government in New Mexico. And then I have 3 gorgeous grandchildren. So I'm a happy mom and grandma.
Good for you. Now, were you raised here on Whidbey? Did you move here? How did you get here?
No, my best friend of 50 years, which is an interesting thing to be at a place in your life where you've been best friends with somebody for half a century. She and her husband have lived here for a very, very long time. And so then through the decades, I would visit them and loved it, of course. And at one point, I just decided, okay, this is where I'm going to live when I retire. And so I was working for a big corporation located in Charlotte, North Carolina at that time. I was an international compensation manager. I gave them 800 days notice because I was the only person who ever had that job. And I knew they'd need to find somebody. And so I said, you know, when I turn 55, I am moving to Whidbey Island. And it was fun. And they gave me a big party when it was time and everything. But what was so interesting, Alan, is the month that I had committed to moving here, August of 2010, Island County offered me the job as their human resources director. Wow. And I had been thinking, okay, because obviously at 55, I still had to work. I thought I would have to get some job at Amazon or somewhere and you know, take the ferry every day. But I never had to do that. I was able to work here at what I thought was the very best human resources job on the island, was working for the county. Because I was so happy to be able to take a public service job. You have no idea. My other job was a good job. They paid really well. It was interesting what I did, but I spent so many hours having to calculate bonuses for people that in my view already made too much money. And so it was like, where's the value to the precious minutes of my life doing this? I would rather spend my life doing things that are helping the public. So I was really happy to get that gig.
It's funny you say that because my day job, I work for a company that does business intelligence software for very large law firms, international law firms. And for a long while, I worked on our budgeting and forecasting product. And so we were calculating not expenses, almost all are labor related, and then revenues. Some of these attorneys are making 6 figures plus a year, and they're billing. The part that really blew my mind was that they will bill $1,200 an hour or more. what could I possibly do for anybody that would ever be worth $1,200 an hour? Can't
That's
even
right.
imagine.
That's
So
right.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So you jobs in primarily in human resources.
Yes, I worked in human resources for 30 years before I ran for county commissioner. Before that, I'd owned a couple businesses that I had sold. I'd owned a used bookstore. I had a sign company for a number of years. Both of those I sold. And before that, well, while a lot of that was going on, I was also a farm wife. I was married to a farmer for 13 years in rural Minnesota. Um, and before that, I was in the United States Army. I was in the Army Security Agency.
Ooh,
And so, I was in it during the end of the Vietnam War. So I'm
wow,
considered a Vietnam era Army veteran.
very good. How long were you in the service?
3 years.
3 years. Very good. Well, thank you for that.
Thank you.
Uh, so I don't know if this is really a pertinent question, but were there other municipal boards or commissions or things like that that you served on before you got into elective office?
Yeah, let's see. I don't think I served on any here on Whidbey Island. I was the chair of a planning commission and zoning board. I was for the fastest growing city in Minnesota at that time. I was the chair of their planning commission and zoning board. I've served on battered women's shelters. I was a founder of an educational endowment foundation. I mean, I've done a lot of those types of advisory committee roles through my life.
Very good. And then I just have to say this because I think it's really neat. I saw on your website that you are a published novelist.
I am, yes. And the second book in my detectivist series comes out in August, so I'm kind of excited about that. Yeah.
Wow, I was going to say, you have time to write now with all,
Oh, I don't now. Oh, no. I
especially,
finished it months ago. I finished it months
oh,
ago.
okay. Difficult to take on any kind of extracurricular kind of thing, certainly during
Yeah,
an election
there's no
campaign.
writing
But
happening now,
yeah,
unfortunately.
well,
But I
hopefully,
love doing it, and I'm a humor writer, and so I write historical novels that are humorous, and I enjoy it very much.
well, it sounds like fun. Very good. All right, so you've been in office for 3.5 years.
Mhm.
And this is your first elective office.
Yes.
You were the HR director for the county beforehand, so maybe there weren't, but were there things? Are there things that you've encountered in your time in elective office that surprised you about the job?
I don't think there's anything that surprised me, no, because as you said, I was watching them, I was participating in what they were doing and so on for a long time. There are things that I've learned that I didn't know then. I've learned how to do the budget, for example.
Right,
Before I had my budget, my HR budget, but the HR budget is just a very tiny part of the $138 million budget that we have. Um, so that's probably the biggest piece of the county government I've done, and I've gotten more involved in the kinds of contracts certainly that other departments have. I have a better understanding of the contracts that the sheriff's department enters into, for example. So those are things. But I'm lucky enough that I knew the county really well by the time I ran.
that's good. So if HR, in my line of work, the bulk of the expenses come from personnel costs. But if HR is
Mhm.
a relatively small part of the county's budget, what is
That's
the
right.
big piece? Is it public works?
Uh, yes, Public Works has the most union employees. They have the largest staff. Um, and certainly their budget's the biggest because of the projects they do. I mean, they do
Right.
these multi-million-dollar projects. So in that way, they're the biggest part of the budget. But I think actually I probably have to compare them also with however you want to compare law enforcement. The sheriff's budget is pretty substantial as well. Um, Probably Public Works is bigger though. I've not looked at it in that way before.
Sure.
Apologize. Jill could tell you the numbers just like that.
Well, Jill Johnson, she's been there for 12 years. She should
Yes,
know a few things.
she
What
does.
are there? Let me come at this from a different way because I know I've had this conversation with Jill. When your constituents reach out to you, and I should mention, you're probably the most available of the three county commissioners with the meetings that you hold when you're not moonlighting at Island Transit. You're at Coupeville every Monday. You're in Freeland every Monday, and then the last Monday of the month you're in Clinton.
Yes.
So when you're talking to people, what are the biggest misconceptions people have about your job as a commissioner and what the county does?
The biggest misconceptions they have, I think, is that they think I can do more for them than I have the authority to do.
Yes.
And so I'm always having to say, I am just one of three. And so what I tell people repeatedly, constantly, is that if you want this thing done that you want done, you need to come and address the Board of County Commissioners at a regular session, or you need to, maybe if it's a code, you need to talk to the Planning Commission. But I strongly encourage people to come to address the Board of County Commissioners at a regular session. And you know what's interesting to me? I've said this so much, and people have really taken it to heart. People in District 1 really have taken that message to heart. And usually now, if there's a lot of people at a board meeting, they're all District 1 people, right? It's my district that's showing up to talk at those board meetings. Absolutely it is. There might be an issue on Camino or a particular issue that's getting people. So for example, there's that road issue on Camino Island. So you'd have 5 or 6 people from Road giving, but if you have the room full of folks, they're South Whidbey.
Well, and part of that makes sense because the courthouse is in District 1, but
yeah, it's easier probably.
I'm sure that your availability is a big contributor to that.
Yeah.
But now I have to ask, so we have that annex on Camino, and people could go to that annex and participate in meetings. Are people doing that?
Or you can Zoom it like we are now, as you know. I mean, you can participate by Zoom on any Board of County Commissioner regular session.
That's true.
And a lot of people do.
Good. Well, good. I've spent a little time on the Planning Commission in Elk Harbor, and that was, they had the same thing. You could hear crickets at most of the meetings. Once in a while, usually because somebody was getting a development approved, we'd have a room full, but most of the time, pretty quiet. Interesting. So you're on the ballot now. If you were elected, who knows what the future brings, but if you're elected, you will be potentially facing the voters again 4 years from now.
I'm not running for re-election. This is it for me.
Okay.
This is it for me. Yeah. When I first decided to run, I committed to 8 years.
Oh, okay.
And so this is going to be the second half of my 8 years in office.
Okay. I know that you have on your website a plan where you want to reach by 2030, but what is the most important thing in that list that you want to be able to tell people, hey, this is what we did. This is why voting for me paid off?
I think that for me, the reason that I ran, there's always lots of reasons, but one of the big reasons I ran is because I felt, and this is going to sound hokey maybe, but it's true, a genuine desire to be a caretaker for this amazing place. And I felt being a county commissioner, it was the best way for me to accomplish that, right? And so my legacy that I want to leave in place when I'm out of here in 4 years is that as a caretaker of these islands, I put in place protections that kept this amazing access to nature and all the beauty that we enjoyed so much in the 2020s. I kept that in place for future generations to enjoy as well. And the big tool that I have to do that, of course, is a comprehensive plan that we're working on right now.
Right, which is probably the most important thing that will happen.
It is. It's the most important document I will be part of during my tenure.
So, because what we were talking beforehand, I just got off a call with Jill, and we were talking about this. The state has maybe I should lay a little background. I've come to understand, you can tell me if I'm all wet, that your job at the county is really to act as sort of the administrative arm of the state. A lot of things that the state wants to have done has to be done through the county.
You're the county. Yeah, that's true.
So the comprehensive plan has a lot of stuff going in it, and more now than ever before that the state says, hey, this is what needs to be done.
Mhm.
How much flexibility do you feel like you as a county commissioner have in putting together the comprehensive plan versus how much the state is telling you have to do?
So the state's telling us what elements we have to include.
Mhm.
What the state's not telling us is what our philosophy has to be. And
Okay.
so the Jill, Janet, and I have been really firm over the last couple of years. We really identified what the three most important philosophical concepts are for us.
Okay.
And that is climate resiliency, equity. We want to make sure that every single person who lives here has access to all of the wonderful things that make living here so wonderful, and health in all policies. And I know you're not a health in all policies fan, but for me, health in all policies is really about um, the idea that, now when we make plans for building a road, we think about things like the health impacts of increased traffic on the local neighborhood, or whether or not we're using materials that are safe for the wetland that's next to the road. So that's just part of our thought process, and we are so committed to this that every time we talk about any single line in that comp plan, we are all of us thinking, okay, how does equity and climate resiliency and health fit into this thing that we're talking about right now? The state never said we had to have a vision. So the way that we approach the elements is unique to us.
Interesting. Okay. So from outside, the reason why it looks like the state's being more and more specific about this is the addition. I spent a lot of time watching Cat Mac make presentations to the city of Oak Harbor about the
Yes.
planning
Yeah.
process. I like Cat. He's a good presenter. And I
Mhm.
know a little bit from being on the planning commission. And this notion that the Growth Management Act has always insisted that more of the growth needs to happen inside the urban growth areas than outside.
Mhm.
Island County has not historically done that. So seems to be more of a push by the state for that to happen now. And also this addition that they've put in where they are saying not only do you have to have X amount of housing because we think your population is going to grow, but it needs to be in these economic strata. Um,
Mhm. Mhm.
and so from outside, it looks like the state is really kind of boxing you in on what can happen in the comp plan. Now, obviously, there are a lot more things than just the housing piece, but from that sense, it seems like they're really laying down the law, what needs to happen. Is that fair?
I I think that the housing piece drives all of the other conversations, really, or at least most of the other conversations, um, because we have to plan for 15,000. The number that we have selected, the low, medium, high. We've selected the medium as the most probable. Would go high, but the 2016 plan they selected the low, and they were knocked out of the water very quickly on that one. So we have to be more reasonable about
Right.
this. So 15,000 people over the next 20 years. And um, the state came up with those numbers not because they're ordaining that you shall allow 15,000 more people in your community. They're saying, all of the projections, all of the data from past years are indicating that what you should be expecting to happen in your community is 15,000 more people are going to want to live in Island County over the next 20 years. And looking at all of the projections, looking at what's happened over time, looking at what's happening through the rest of the state, you should plan that at least half of those people are going to need some type of affordable housing, because there's not going to be, only half. Well, if you look at it, the average median income is an average, right?
Right.
So half the people under there are going to need some kind of assistance. And then the other half above that probably will be able to find reasonable will be able to find homes, whether they're reasonably priced or not, they'll be able to find homes. But planning for half of those 15,000 people to need affordable housing, the 15,000 people, we're expecting that's going to require 8,000 new housing units over the next 20 years. That means 4,000 new housing units that will provide housing from the people who are totally homeless to people who are making, let's say, 120% of the average median income. So that's a lot of housing that's going to have to, to a great deal, be subsidized. And that's a difficult thing to say. It's a difficult thing to acknowledge, but that's the state presenting to us what they view as realistic. And so we have to consider that as what's probably going to happen to us. And then figure out where is this housing going to go? How are we going to do this?
See, here's the part where I'm not sure about how realistic it is. And it's not because I think that the state is way off on their estimates, but historically, traditionally, houses became more affordable because the house was built and it had a homeowner, and then they moved on to something else, and the market grew and there were more houses built, and then those earlier houses became more affordable.
Yes,
and
that's true.
We're not building much.
The other thing, Alan, is that the houses, those early starter homes or whatever, those, as soon as they come on the market, people scoop them up and they turn them into Airbnbs or second homes. So we just don't have the rental market or even the entry home housing market that we would have had 20 or 30 years ago, before there was the Airbnb situation, before people just automatically started having second homes in other communities. And I think the second home thing on Whidbey Island, is going to become more and more critical. We're hot here today. Today is kind of hot for us. Nationwide, they're broiling. Nationwide, it's crazy. So if I was a person living in Arizona today, where I'd want to go buy a second home? It's Whidbey Island.
Sure. I've always thought that people in Arizona are nuts anyway, but.
Well, that's a whole other issue. But it means that or even New York, Michael, my partner, is in New York this week. He has a conference in New York this week. He says he's never been this hot in New York in the summertime. Apparently it's unbearable. And the entire country is experiencing that right now. And so in our comprehensive plan, the Board of County Commissioners, we're committed to doing something, to addressing Airbnbs in some way, because we know we have to. We have to find some way to ensure that there is sufficient starter homes and rental properties here in the county. We just have to.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing to wrangle with, because it just seems like it's really hard to build here. So I live in Oak Harbor. There is you get to Oak Harbor from time to time, so where
I do. I like Oak Harbor. I like Oak Harbor.
That hillside above Safeway and Walmart has been under development now for 3-4 years, and my wife and I drive down Barrington and say, oh, it looks like they're doing something. Oh, it looks like they're slipping back. As far as I know, nothing's been built. Why is it so hard? Some of that, of course, goes on the city of Oak Harbor. Why is it so hard to build things anymore?
Well, in Island County, not speaking about Oak Harbor, but I suspect they have some of the same problem. In Island County, all of the really easily buildable lots are already built on.
Okay.
So every lot that's available now has things. They have wetlands, or they don't perk, or they have a slope that's not unstable or whatever. And so there's all these extra permits that you have to go through from an environmental perspective and a safety perspective for the citizen as well. And so it takes longer for that way from an Island County perspective. Speaking of Oak Harbor, though, as a person who goes to Oak Harbor quite a lot, and I look at that hill, and my first issue always is, how the heck is Oak Harbor going to manage the traffic once this is built out?
Yeah.
Because that traffic there at Swantown and the highway is already crazy. And from the District 1 commissioner perspective, I worry because for my citizens, because if there is a wildfire, if there's an earthquake, how are we going to get people off this island?
right?
And Oak Harbor is one of our means of egress. I don't want to see anything that makes that already bad bottleneck even more of a bottleneck. So I
Yeah.
think that the City Council of Oak Harbor, the Planning Department of Oak Harbor, the Planning Commission, they have a lot of things that they're having to juggle right now, because if I see this from as an outsider to Oak Harbor, I know that they're thinking about it all the time.
Yeah, I certainly don't envy CAC his job.
No, it's a tough job, and he's a great guy. It is a tough
Yeah,
job.
I like CAC a lot. Um, you mentioned, I think, Island Transit before, and it's been
Mhm.
hot in the news lately. So let's talk about that. Um, no, I don't know that it's necessary to kind of go over what happened with Todd Morrow and all that. Although I can't help but think that there's some similarities between what was going on there and what happened at the Whidbey Health Board for a long while. It sounds like there were some oversight issues that weren't being handled. But um, so I guess maybe a minute or so on what's going on over there and how you're involved with it.
So, as you know, as I said, HR. I've done HR for a long time. So what the board of Island Transit did, and I appreciate that I don't have to go into it here, but what the board did was we terminated the employment of the executive director, and we put the Human Resources Administrative Services Director on admin leave.
Okay.
So that meant, and those two individuals were the primary leaders in that organization. They were the top two leaders in that organization. And so we decided to do that. And Craig Sear, who's the chair of the Island Transit Board, he announced to the board that he had volunteered to step in to be the interim chair, which is what happened last time Island Transit went through a thing like this. It's the same kind of process. And I said to him, well, okay, Craig, does that mean you're going to take some kind of leave from your employer? Because Craig has a full-time job on the other side. And he
Right.
said, no, I can't do that. I'll be available for about an hour every day by phone.
Wow.
And I'm thinking about the fact we're letting the two top leaders of the organization be gone. And
Right.
so I said, okay, I'm willing to step into the HR person's role temporarily. This is temporary. It's only temporary, Alan. I saw your implication earlier in one of your newsletters. No, this is temporary for me. I already did the HR thing. I'm not interested in doing it again. I'm willing to step in and do that because I work from Coopville. I can just take and this is what I've done. I have my desk there, and I have my county computer on this side, and I have my Island Transit computer on this side, and I'm doing both of those jobs at the same time. So I am doing two full-time jobs at the same time. So far, I've been able to keep up more or less. I'm going to have to do a whole lot of work here this weekend on something for Island Transit, but that's okay. It's okay. The thing that's kind of falling to the wayside is my campaign. I don't have any time to campaign.
Well, there's always something that gets squeezed. But so the HR person there is on administrative leave. Will they be coming back? Are you going to bring them back? How's that going to work out?
I can't talk about personnel issues.
That's fine. Totally understand. Um, in the meantime, there's this whole question of Island Transit's commitment to going to zero emission vehicles in the next handful of years, 6 years, something like that. But we learned from Todd Morrow that the orders, I think they were canceled for the vans that they had. Am I
So
remembering it?
this board canceled the vans.
Okay.
This board, we did that a couple weeks ago. They had an order they were preparing to sign a contract for 9 new electric vans. What we had discovered is that we had already purchased 2 electric vans. They had been promised to us that they could go 200 miles on a charge.
Mm-hmm.
The most we could get out of them was 60 miles on a charge. In addition, the 2 chargers that we have at Island Transit, they were having their own charger problems. And I think if you look around and you look at chargers, you'll see chargers often have chargers.
Right.
So it was very, very clear to the board that the technology is not ready for full immersion into electric vans. Now, today we made a decision, the Island Transit Board met, and we're going to do some electric minivans that it's going to be a different kind of a use. It's for the rideshare program.
Okay.
And so they can use the smaller vans for electric for that particular program, which is important to us. We remain committed to zero emission. We are totally committed to zero emission, but we recognize that you can't just go buy the vehicles and then, roll your thumbs thinking that there's going to be the infrastructure to support it. There just isn't. It's like the state and the electric ferries, right?
Right.
We want electric ferries, or we want hydrogen ferries, or some kind of hybrid ferries, but we're still waiting for the technology and the infrastructure. It's an important vision. You need to have the goals. You need to move that towards that, but there's a lot of pain in the years before you get there.
Well, exactly. And I've been seeing this. I mean, it's not just a problem for island transit. It's a problem all over the place. The president has this, many billions of dollars that have been appropriated for building chargers, and they've built 7 so far out of the 500,000 they wanted to build. And the state wants to move away from allowing people to buy internal combustion engine vehicles in some fairly short amount of time, I think by 2030 or 2035. But there's not the infrastructure in place. And so I understand the concern. I'm not sure that I share it, but I understand the concern that we need to move away from fossil fuel powered vehicles. I'm just not sure that it's a realistic thing to try at this time. One of the things in your plan was moving to hydrogen powered vehicles, which are even further away from an infrastructure point of view. So
yeah, they're farther away than the electric, I think, for everyday use. I think that the transition from the horse to the car was painful. And I remember, because I'm old, the transition from leaded fuel to unleaded fuel. Remember that? I don't know if you're old enough to know that.
Just barely.
But everyone was the same kind of thing. Everybody's cars are leaded. What are we going to do when they're not selling leaded? How am I going to drive my car? I mean, it was a big deal. We made the transition. It wasn't easy. We will make this transition too. It'll happen, but we just need to be patient with the process.
Fair enough.
The hardest part for me in being patient with the process is the whole ferry thing. That's the one that annoys the heck out of me, because we're not going to have any new ferries until 2028 because of the laws that were passed by the legislature. And in the meantime, so people who are unhappy about the ferry situation now, I tell everyone, this is easy compared to what it's going to be two or 3 years from now. It's going to get worse before it gets better.
Right, because there's just so much infrastructure, and then where are they going to find the people to manufacture it now? And putting together, as there will be an intro piece to this. People watching this will have already seen it. It says we sent out these questions to you in advance, and looking into that, well, it's just not very clear how they're going to get the electric charging to get to the ferry terminals. Where's that extra electrical generation going to come from? It's not going to be fossil fuel powered plants, because the state's committed to not doing that. And one of the candidates in the other race for District 2 has talked about breaching the dams on the Lower Snake River, which would take something on the order of 3,000 megawatts of electrical generation out of capacity. And that's really the generation you want, because it is fossil fuel free, completely renewable. It's just there's some aspirations here, and it's not very clear how we get from here to there.
It's hard. None of this is easy. It's like windmills. I love windmills, and yes, they kill birds, and I love birds. It's there is no pure answer, and it's really hard.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you could hear that or not, but my little timer went off
Did it? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
I promised we would not get through anywhere near the whole list of questions.
Right, right.
Worn out again. So, but I always want to end with this. So if people are interested in supporting your campaign, getting in touch with you, what's the best way for people to reach out to you? Is it Facebook?
Well, you can reach me for campaign wise. You can reach me at electmelbacon@gmail.com.
Okay.
Or you can go on my website, which is electmelbacon.com. So for the campaign, that's it. If people want to subscribe to my county commissioner newsletter, however, then they should reach me at District 1 at islandcountywa.gov. So, but that's a different hat, right? That's not I want to be really clear, separate
Absolutely.
county commissioner from the person who's running for reelection.
Well, I certainly recommend if for anyone who has an interest in what's going on with the county, your weekly newsletter comes out on Friday afternoons. Very useful. And of course, we reprint it in full at the Voter Interest Project, but you'll get it sooner if you subscribe directly. So,
and I'm grateful, very grateful that you included in your newsletter.
Yes, well, totally valuable. So thank you so much for taking this time. I know there's many things as you've got going on. Half an hour here is valuable, but I think it'll be beneficial to the voters, and I really appreciate your doing it. So thank you.
Thanks a lot, Alan. Really grateful.
You bet. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you for watching our interview with Melanie Bacon, who's running for re-election as the Island County Commissioner in District 1. We invite you to subscribe to our newsletter, available in 4 local editions: Camino Island, North Whidbey, Central Whidbey, and South Whidbey. The newsletter arrives in your mailbox every Monday morning with news and events from your part of Island County. Subscribe to our newsletter at voterinterests.com/subscribe. And look for more of these candidate interviews as the election season continues. Thank you.